Be nice about the way people look. That's right, that's how I decided to start this video. Because you never really know what somebody is going through in their mind. Also, when you do break it down, like Degeneration X, any individual is allowed to choose to look however they want. It's called life. There have been some incredible transformations in wrestling though, ever since 2020. So let's get out our support flag and wave it really hard. Number 10, JD McDonough. Or JD McDonut, it's your choice. But if you do go back to 2020, you will find him as Jordan Devlin. Dare I say it? Kinda just looks like your ordinary clean-cut babyface. Now everybody knew he could go too, especially when he was in NXT UK, but there was this idea that that was going to be his ceiling, and all of a sudden WWE did call him up and they're like, oh hi, why don't you come to NXT proper? Which he did. That was 2022, and 1 year later he was hanging around with the Judgment Day, and as the brand new JD McDonough, he had this slick back hair and kind of this shib-eating grin, and you looked at him like, yeah, I don't like you very much, and somebody should punch you in the face. He also sort of had this way about him where if you were down an alleyway, he would probably stab you, and this was going to work out very well for him, because after the Judgment Day had gone through a big old transformation, Finn Balor said it the best, they were street trash. That's kind of the vibe that JD gave off, intentionally. So he really has now found his place on Raw, and he adds a lot to this group. He hit a home run. Number 9, Karrion Kross. Karrion Kross's first main roster call-up was awful. It wasn't his fault, but he lost to Jeff Hardy on day 1, and then for some reason, we dressed him up like a gimp soldier. Look at this. Look at the image on the screen right now. What is he wearing, and what is that helmet? Kross also had a shaven head at that point, and that's why I'm going to call him a Mother Hubbard, because these days he's come back and he's got long hair. I was like, you shouldn't do that to us, man. Some of us had to put up with it every single day. Thankfully, all the other garb was gone though too, and he kind of moved away from the spooky wookie and just became a conniving son of a gun. And ever since then, yeah, I think he's been way better. He also started the Final Testament faction, so again, look at it when he first got called up, and look at him now. You could probably go out there and convince someone these were brothers. This was really smart as well though, because it does allow you to forget about version 1, not Matt Hardy. Now let's never talk about that again. Stupid. Number 8, Seth Rollins. So we do go back 4 years to 2020. Seth Rollins was still dealing with the fallout of that Hell in a Cell match, to the point he had to go heel, even though in 2019 he'd been a pretty damn good babyface. As he was refining himself during this journey though, he went, you know what, why don't I just be a giant clown man? He adopted the laugh, and he started wearing this audacious clothing, and ever since then, well, he's another guy totally smashed it. I mean, he really must have taken a page out of Randy Savage's book, and maybe even someone like Liberace, but he found himself amongst this crazy sports entertainment world, to the point he took this character and he became a babyface again. I think that's a nice story. It's always going to happen, because of course when you do something to get a rise out of the audience but it makes them laugh, they will turn you. But it's the same kind of a deal. Nobody thought in 2020 Seth Rollins was going to come dressed like a cloud. One time he actually did. I suppose it also ties into the fact that he is Seth frickin' Rollins, and now the frickin' makes sense, even though it doesn't. Number 7, Cody Rhodes. So we are all used to it now, but let's not forget a few years ago, Cody Rhodes did ditch his bleached blonde hair, and he had dark hair again, because he was trying to resemble the bad version of Superman. And as he has said, nobody actually got it. The real change I want to discuss today, though, lies where he was when he did go through this transformation, because of course in 2020, Cody Rhodes was all elite. This is why it's amazing to talk about, because even then, Rhodes was saying, well, I can never go back to WWE, that door is closed, when it reopened in 2022, and he went on to become a super duper mega star. It really is quite the journey. He also became the heir apparent to Roman Reigns, and nowadays he's the brand new John Cena. So if you are going to start talking about transformations, well, you're going to be hard pushed to find a better one. Just to make it a bit hoity-toity as well, I would say a part of this too is that Cody Rhodes is now happy, because yeah, during those last few days in AEW, well, I think something had clearly gone down. Number 6, Nikki Cross. I mean, the changes here are insane. Because do not forget that not that long ago, Nikki Cross was Nikki Ash, a wannabe superhero who kinda sucked. Now, the way she pitched this character was way better than the way Vince McMahon understood it, because when it was portrayed on TV, well, it didn't really click. Fast forward to today, though, she is part of the Wyatt Six. Look, she'll be on screen right now. She's all kinds of terrifying. I'm pretty sure I bumped into her in Resident Evil 7. She also plays this role to perfection, and before she got this, she was lost on the main roster, which is not cool. So this is one of those 180s that I will support until the cows come home. It's what we should be doing with everybody on the books. You gotta find their place. Also pretty sure before all this, her last match was November 2023, and even then she was just in a random battle royal. So basically Nikki has gone from happy person to proper serial killer. If somebody does that in the real life, you definitely go, well, that's quite the transformation. Number 5, Dexter Loomis. And it's exactly the same for Dexter Loomis. He has totally changed from a guy that had short hair and a moustache to having a full-on beard and dreadlocks. Where'd that come from? Amazingly though, his gimmick hasn't changed that much, because beforehand he was like a kidnapper that once did steal the Miz, and now he's like, what, a psychopath or some kind of like killer man? I don't really know, but you wouldn't want to bump into him in a dark night. He is now Mercy the Buzzard, and he has definitely got in super duper shape for this, although actually he was in super duper good shape before. But yeah, talk about embracing a new role. It's quite inspiring to see. Number 4, Bo Dallas. I mean, you knew this one was coming given the last two, but if I had told you in 2020 that Bo Dallas was going to become Uncle Howdy, you'd be like, are you drunk and what are you talking about? It has been such a ride for Bo as well, because he was released in 2021, when eventually he was brought back to the WWE, and of course we were meant to do this partnership with his brother Bray Wyatt. Bray very tragically passed away. What it has done though is given birth to the Wyatt Six, where Bo Dallas has completely embraced this Uncle Howdy character. Have you seen some of those promos he has been doing? I mean, they are second to none. I would say the ultimate compliment is that he feels like a totally different person today, and let's not forget that match he had with Chad Gable on Raw. That was stellar stuff, so yeah, he's gone from being fired to being one of the main acts on Raw. That rules. Number 3, Rhea Ripley. I mean, this one is all about pictures. Look at it, it's wonderful. I mean, Rhea still looked awesome back in 2020, but then you hear the story from her mouth, and it all comes down to one thing: being herself. Because she has admitted for a while she tried to be what the world thought she should be. Well, I suppose she woke up one day and went flub it. Rhea Ripley is the person I would like to take on when she just adopted all of the mannerisms she had now. And yeah, she comes across like a great person. It's also been such a success because she is now one of the most popular people on the roster. And it's not like we did this in a couple of days. This has been building over the last few years. That's what makes it better still. It also culminated with the Judgment Day when she left to form that team with Damian Priest. And I tell you this, you think she's a big deal now, wait until 2025, she is figuratively going to explode. I really do think this is another reason why she has found so much success, because people stumble across her and say, well, that person is 100% authentic. That's what people like in 2024. You wanna believe. Number 2, Gunther. I mean, in 2020, Gunther was Walter, and he looked like a tank. That is not the case today. It also ties into his aspirations. In 2020, he wasn't interested in WWE, was happy to be in NXT UK so he could be closer to home. When he had a change of thought, he totally transformed his body. And yeah, he got to Raw and he became Gunther. It also meant when he finally got there, he felt like a brand new person. But it led to some fans going, oh, this is never going to work. But they were totally wrong, because this version of the man, well, I think it's the best. I mean, the amount of work that goes into something like this is next level, and the mindset too. So even though we're meant to boo him, think about this on a darker night. The man's got something special. Number 1, Dominic Mysterio. Because once again, if I had told you once Dominic Mysterio had debuted at SummerSlam against Seth Rollins, that in a few years he's gonna be a dirty, creepy, kind of sexual obsessed heel, you'd be like, no way, man. But he did go on to do this, and now he gets more boos than anyone. He's also grown a mullet and a moustache, and you can never fault that, but it's his mannerisms, man. He totally understands how to piss off an audience. That's why really he's only going to continue to improve. The dude is still so young. So it must have something to do with that Mysterio name. And while Ray would go on to become one of the biggest baby faces of all time, when it comes to the condom, well, he's probably going to do the exact opposite. It really is a masterclass though in how to embrace all of these traits. So if you are a young up and coming wrestler and you want people to hate you too, just kind of look like Dom. Again, it's the things he says on top of all of this, but he also looks like a piece of trash. Don't get me wrong. I mean that as a huge compliment. The man gets wrestling better than some people that have been doing it for 30 years. That is damn impressive.
I do not like the term jobber. Sadly, it has done the round, so we all know what it means. Enhancement talent is better. It takes everybody to make a wrestling show work. Some people feel like getting put in such a position is the end of their career, though. But no, in fact, it can turn out this is for the best. When you smash through the ceiling, you have a lovely story to tell. And who was able to make this leap from zero to hero? Well, I am Simon Miller, and here are the facts. Number 10, EC3. Wind your clocks back to this one. Before Ethan Carter III had chosen such a name, he was in NXT, and he was called Derek Bateman. Actually sounds like somebody from The Simpsons. This wasn't the NXT we know and love today, as it was still finding its feet, but yes, from 2009 to 2013, this is where the future EC3 plied his craft. There wasn't really too much to this Bateman character either, and mostly it felt like he was there to put others over. Like many, he was then let go, but really that was for the best. He soon arrived in TNA, where he took on the character of Dixie Carter's nephew, and yes, that's where the name came from. It was an astute decision, as in June 2015, he won the TNA World title, and he had a 101-day reign. He stayed at the top of the card too, so look at that. EC did prove everybody wrong, if you did indeed doubt him. If you didn't, you totally smashed it. Well done, Gold Star. His second round in WWE seemed like he was going to benefit from this too, and it kinda did in NXT. Then he got called up to the main roster, and it went really badly. That'll be a talking point forever. I don't think he was actually ever really given a proper chance. Number 9, just incredible. The peak of ECW is still spoken about today, although the stories of some wrestlers have been lost. You can still see how many of them rose to the top though, because Paul Heyman is doing the same thing right now in WWE. You take an individual, you push their strengths, and you hide their weaknesses. It's how anyone in charge should operate, and man, did Just Incredible benefit from that. If you do go back to 1993 and 1994, you will see him as PJ Walker in the WWF, and he was getting beaten a lot. He must have done a decent job though, as it turned into a full-time contract, where he was transformed into the Portuguese man of war, Aldo Montoya. No, don't overthink that one. It was just a crazy idea. Aldo sort of just hung out and played Nintendo for a while before he did arrive in ECW in 1997. No one really knew what to expect, but as well as a good tag team with Lance Storm, in April 2000, Justin had enough momentum and bam, he became the ECW World Champion. He held on to this until the company went down in 2001 too, and really WWE should have used him better when he came back into the fold. Fans were intrigued to see what we could do with this guy. Sadly, before long, he got lost in the shuffle. Number 8, Britt Baker. In 2016, after a brand split, Nia Jax was put on Raw and told she was going to destroy people for a while. A tale as old as time itself. Let's get the monster over by letting them be a monster. It happened to Braun Strowman too, which is when James Ellsworth became a thing. But somebody on the other side was indeed Britt Baker. She got mauled on the 25th of July show. Baker must have done alright because she was in somebody's mind in 2018 with NXT. She was hired to do the same thing for one Shayna Baszler. Outside of all that though, she was also making noise on the indie scene, when of course she was involved in the first All In. She was hired by AEW and bam. A quick switch to being the heel saw her become the women's champion in 2021. Britt was even able to do away with the ghost of Isaac Yankem by proving you could be a wrestling dentist, and during this time, man, she was super over. Sure, it's all gone a bit weird recently, but at the time, what a flipping 180. Number 7, Alexa Bliss. Alexa Bliss herself has talked about this. When Sasha Banks, Charlotte Flair, and Bayley were getting all the praise for changing women's wrestling in WWE, she was a little bit of an outlier, had a cheerleader gimmick, and it didn't feel like something that was going to translate to Raw or SmackDown. In late 2016, Bliss did get the call up from NXT, and doesn't it just go to show? A tweak here, a change there, make sure the machine gets behind you, and boom, before long she was the SmackDown Women's Champion, and the way she presented herself was perfect for the main roster. The Little Miss Bliss persona just worked. Even when she lost that title, she won a bunch more and proved she had legs too. We all remember the Bray Wyatt inspired gimmick change, and even if it wasn't everybody's cup of tea, go look at the numbers. I do believe she smashed it. If you continue your research, you will see it was a big shift because her NXT record was just lose, lose, lose. Even when she was elevated, you could kind of tell it wasn't going to go her way. The move to the blue brand changed all of that, and Bliss never looked back. She was very important to the product from 2016 through to 2021, and as and when she does come back, I don't doubt this will continue. She went and figured it out. Number 6, Liv Morgan. 2015 was a totally different world for WWE. I mean, that's obvious, you don't need a time machine for that, but back then Eva Marie was being pushed huge in NXT, whereas Liv Morgan didn't even get a name. When they fought, most people referred to her as the local competitor. With a bit of research, it turns out her name was Marley, and of course she was quickly dispatched. Naturally. It soon changed when the Riot Squad was born, and while that was up and down, Liv Morgan established herself as somebody who had potential. The Harley Quinn tie-in helped her, but there was more. And yeah, sure, there was some awkward stuff with that Lana Rusev storyline. The 2022 babyface push didn't work, mostly because it was bungled by the powers that be, but you know the deal. WWE used her unfortunate injury to their advantage, turned Morgan heel, and her 2024 was excellent. Won the Women's World title, had that great relationship with Dominic Mysterio, totally reinvented herself. Liv plays back up to nobody now either, and there's no reason this can't continue. Her act is working and she's damn good at it. Surely there is going to be loads more with this character going forward. I mean, we've only touched the top of the iceberg, so let's keep it going. Number 5, AJ Styles. AJ Styles was ahead of his time. Not just in how he changed what in-ring wrestling could be, but in the early 2000s he was offered a WWE developmental deal, and he turned it down. Not only would it have uprooted his wife who was about to become a teacher, but AJ felt like the company wouldn't use him correctly. He had to go out there and make a name for himself. Styles was already affiliated with the WWE because he would appear on Heat and Metal between 2001 and 2002, but of course around that time is when TNA was born. They saw something in this man, and you know the rest. Even though he was one of their most important assets, he still actually wasn't used correctly. And sure, he became the world champion, but I tell you, he should have been the franchise player. It's why he would leave for Japan after getting lowballed on money, and this worked again. Styles somehow got even better, and in 2016, the mega WWE contract arrived, and AJ made a surprise debut in the Royal Rumble. Even then, there was trepidation because Vince McMahon never understood such performers, but the cream always rises to the top. He did such a good job, he won multiple world titles, and if you had followed his entire career, this was incredible. If you do want to pull it back just to the headlines, it meant AJ Styles turned down OVW, and 20 years later was flying higher than most. It's such a cool story, and why he's a generational talent. The man changed the game. Number 4, Bryan Danielson. So I think most people know this story, but it's still quite the tale. For Daniel Bryan, as he was known in WWE, defied all the odds and proved that no matter what Vince McMahon thinks, you can't outdo the fans. Even when he was first hired, not many thought he'd be used correctly because he was quote-unquote too small. Saying that today sounds ridiculous. If you go back to 2000 to 2003, you will see Bryan pop up in many enhancement matches in WWF, and trust me, even the biggest fan of the indie scene didn't go, oh wow, there's a future WrestleMania main eventer. It's just not how WWE did things. The American Dragon also lost the likes of Lance Cage, Sean O'Haire, and even John Cena as he was making his way to superstardom. To be honest, I think Bryan was just happy to be used. Fast forward to 2013, and he was so over it became a war between the audience and management, which ended when he did indeed close the show at Mania 30. I mean, it's just the best story. At first, he was most definitely seen as low on the totem pole by WWE, though. You can't pretend otherwise. They were just totally incorrect, and thank goodness it all worked out. Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson inspired a whole generation. Number 3, Jeff Hardy. It is so crazy to try and process this, but Jeff Hardy once faced Scott Hall in an enhancement match. Hall was a big fan of him as well, and that is how long Jeff has been around. Doesn't actually make much sense. I would also include Matt in this list because he would become a TNA champion and an ECW champion, but of course his brother went a step further because despite sneaking into the company as a 16-year-old and losing to everyone, he would indeed become the WWE champ. It wasn't a fluke either. Fans were desperate for it. It was June 1994 when he was beaten by Razor Ramon, which sums it up, and his name was Keith Davis. Amazing. He even lost to King Kong Bundy, which is so insane it will keep you up at night, when somebody must have realized it was time. The Hardys became a thing, and let's face it, they changed the tag team scene forever. By 2008, Jeff's popularity couldn't be ignored, and he did become the WWE Champion and a 2-time World Heavyweight Champion. If it wasn't for his personal issues, I tell you, his adventure could have reached even greater heights. I tell you, my friends, people love this guy. Even with all that, though, he still went higher than most thought, given at one point, people saw him as a beanpole being destroyed by new generation talent. I don't get how he's still going given the wear and tear on his body, but hey, that is the secret sauce, and it's built right into his brain. Number 2, Jon Moxley. Look at these images side by side. It's the same story as before. Nobody thought this red-headed menace was going to become the WWE Champion. This is when the soon-to-be Dean Ambrose was trying to make a name for himself as he appeared on WWEC shows in 2006 and 2007. He had to grind for a few more years, but in 2011 he did indeed get a developmental deal. Step 1. It was quite the rise as by 2012 he was debuting on WWE TV as one-third of the Shield. This wasn't your run-of-the-mill arrival either. Along with Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, management had decided they were going to push these guys. Within a few months, they were a featured act. After they split in 2014, Ambrose almost became a loose cannon type, and while WWE did indeed make him do jokes, he was able to fight through those too. 2 years later, as the Shield played past the parcel with the WWE title, it was Dean who walked away with the gold. The man had done it. We soon learned he was most definitely somebody who marched to the beat of his own drum, which made him even more interesting, especially because he left WWE by his own accord. This wasn't his type of wrestling, so he walked out the door. Talk about integrity. He also became the AEW World Champion, so go and look at that first picture again. Not sure anybody predicted that, which is the point of this list. Anybody can make it, and good. Screw rhyme and reason. I mean, it would be rubbish, it would the other way around. Number 1, Mick Foley. This one is a bit unfair, but always remember what Vince McMahon said to Jim Ross after JR finally convinced his boss to hire Mick Foley. McMahon, with his usual grace, made it clear he was only doing it to prove the idea would fail. Yeah, good work. Of course, he was totally wrong, and Foley would go on to win the WWF title multiple times, and it was awesome. Talk about a guy that was easy to support. Even as a heel, he just gave everything. We all know his bumps were next level bonkers. Way back in 1986, Foley also got a few bookings as an enhancement talent in the World Wrestling Federation. I mean, on Wrestling Challenge, Kamala of all people defeated him in about 39 seconds. The Bulldog and Hercules also took their time whooping his ass, and Mick talked about that. Apparently, Davey Boy Smith kicked the life out of him. Of course, nothing would slow him down, and not only was he a success in WCW, but he did an ECW before getting his WWF shot, and look at the rest. Mankind was the reason The Undertaker was able to get things going again. He needed a viable opponent. Bingo. So if you are just starting on your wrestling journey, go and look what Foley did. If you only replicate half of it, you are going to be on to a winner.
Do you know what I love? Body transformations. I know that makes me sound like a really weird, bald moron, but when you can see the dedication the hard work an individual has put into their physique, especially in the aesthetic world of pro wrestling, I just think they deserve a round of applause. And that is exactly what we are going to do today, because my name is Simon Miller. Welcome to WhatCulture Wrestling. Please do subscribe. And this is the 10 most radical wrestler transformations ever. Number 10, Jinder Mahal. The best thing about 2017 Jinder Mahal is that he looks like he could kick 2014 Jinder Mahal's ass. I mean, one guy barely looks like he's ever been to the gym, and the other looks like he lives there and snorts chicken breast. And just for a PSA, never snort chicken breast. It's incredible from a visual standpoint, but the real joy is when you learn what was going on in Mahal's head, because he has admitted in the mid-2010s he was unmotivated and he was depressed, and that had an effect on his body, and it had an effect on his career. After being let go from the WWE 7 years ago, though, this served as the light bulb moment he needed, and not only did he work on getting happy, but he also worked on getting mega jacked, and it definitely paid off, because when he returned to WWE, Vince saw those abs and went, "That's my brand new WWE Champion." And I still can't believe it, because he literally went from opening match guy to at the top of the card, and all this would have been fine if WWE had just let it build a little bit. But no, the idea had been had, so we had to go hullabaloo and make it happen the next week. But still, I like Jinder Mahal, so good for him. Number 9, Akira Tozawa. No one realizes this, mostly because it would be weird if you were just following pro wrestlers and how much weight they lost. But Tozawa used to look like that. Right? So back in 2008 when he was with Dragon Gate, if you fast forwarded 7 years, not only was he having some of the best matches in the promotion, but he had shed a ton of body fat, and it all came together so well, he got hired by the WWE in 2016. There's no two ways about it either. That guy must have been crazy dedicated and had his food on point. I'm sure you've heard the slogan, abs are made in the kitchen, and Tozawa is absolutely proof of that, and what an inspiration. And it's not like he looked 70s big beforehand, like a dude with loads of muscle. He was basically just a fat guy, and he transformed himself which is why I respect it even more. Number 8, Bubba Ray Dudley. When Bubba Ray Dudley was in ECW, I just think he was meant to be a big country boy that looked like he was able to kick your ass. He wasn't that focused on his physique, until one day all of a sudden was. Because he looked kind of the same when he did join TNA, but after splitting from Devon Dudley and decided he needed a brand new gimmick, he became Bully Ray and all of a sudden dropped a hell of a lot of weight and started to look more jacked. Given what his new persona was too, this helped it even more and allowed fans to buy him as a main eventer and a world champion. And look, the world of wrestling should always be an open door for all shapes and sizes, but when somebody looks like they could beat you up, well, it's always going to help. It was so beloved as well that there are still fans out there who are enraged that WWE never allowed Bubba Ray to have a run as Bully Ray, and I agree with them. It was all right there, and we just didn't do it. Number 7, Brian Cage. I know, you're looking at both pictures and wondering, how the hell is that the same person? Well, it's nice and simple. The bigger guy basically ate the smaller guy and inherited all of his gains. That's not a thing. Seriously though, before Brian Cage essentially turned himself into a professional bodybuilder, he looked like every single I've just started indie wrestler ever, and then he found the weight room, and I think he literally exploded. It means these days he has one of the best physiques in the business, and he's just such a mass monster and I love it, and he was always going to need to do this given he started walking around calling himself the Swolverine. I don't care about any theories you have either. That, my friends, takes a hell of a lot of hard work. It doesn't just happen and you have to have incredible genetics to pull it off. To the point that a small part of me hates Brian Cage. If I could get a straw and stick it into him and, well, we're not even gonna go down that path. But honestly, just amazing. Number 6, Vince McMahon. And we say Vince McMahon, but to be fair, we don't really know. Because when Vinnie Mac was running around in the 90s as a commentator, he still loved going to the gym. And as he always wore oversized suits, no one really knows what was under that jacket. He couldn't do that by the time he was involved in a feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin though, and one moment that all fans remember is when he walked out for the 1999 Royal Rumble. That dude, he'd been pumping some serious weight. Jerry Lawler and Jim Ross also sold this huge on commentary, although to be fair, Vince may have told them to do that. And I suppose the equivalent now would be Michael Cole in a few years returning, and he's added 20 pounds of mass. Actually though, he got in shape too. You can see that on WWE.com. So let's go with Adnan Virk. Although that's never gonna happen, because as we found out recently, Vince McMahon loves how small Adnan is, because it makes the wrestlers look bigger. Number 5, The Rock. Now one of the most influential gym guys ever, The Rock has actually come in many shapes and sizes over the years. In the late 90s, he had the quintessential pro wrestler body. Then he joined Hollywood and was told to slim down so he'd be more accessible for movie roles. And then by the time he'd got all the power in the film industry, he somehow got bigger than he's ever been in his entire life. He shares all this on Instagram and is a huge inspiration for so many, although he also does talk about the post-anabolic window, and I don't want to get too off track here, but Rock, you don't need to worry about that. It's been proven to be a myth. I mean, you can do it if you want, but you don't need to stress. Not that it matters though, because there are people out there that would actually kill other human beings if it meant they could look like The Rock. And 9 times out of 10, if you are making people think that way, you've probably done something right. Even though in doing so, you've inspired others to do very wrong. Number 4, The Big Show. No wonder Paul White was pissed off when he got dragged off of WWE TV. He had got his body fat so low, you could see his abdominal muscles, and then Vince McMahon went, nope, you don't get to be on the show. And as Big Show Paul White himself said in interviews, why wasn't this the case when I was the champion? Then I was a legit 500 pounds of eating cheeseburgers. That just sums up wrestling. It would be impressive whenever, but given the fact that the dude is in his 40s and is an exceptional large human being, well, you've just got to keep adding praise to it. And no wonder he struggled to do this back in the day. Imagine being a giant and having to get on a plane. I mean, it sucks at the best of time, even more so when you need 2 seats. Again, the coolest part of all of this is that there are plenty of stories back in the day of the Big Show being taken off WWE TV and told, hey, you need to get in shape, and for one reason or another, he wasn't able to do it. But now in his more mature years, he has absolutely smashed it. Number 3, the Blue Meanie. I am pretty sure that I could show you these 2 pictures and tell you they were brothers or something, but they are some of the most tremendous and amazing before and after pictures you're ever likely to see, because the Blue Meanie lost over 100 pounds. And yeah, these days he has put some of the weight back on, but that doesn't mean we don't celebrate what he has achieved. And also he did this because when he returned to ECW in 1999-2000, he wanted to dedicate himself to a new gimmick known as Blue Boy, realized, well, I better look like this, so he went and did it. So you can't help but praise it because he must have worked his ass off, and if we do jump into the modern day, I don't even care. As long as he's happy and as long as he's healthy, well, he's ticked all the boxes that you should be ticking. Number 2, Scott Steiner. Do not be fooled. Even when Scott Steiner was running around in a singlet, he was still a big guy. It was just when he transformed into Big Papa Pump, well, Another guy that looks completely different, although that could be because he dyed his hair and started walking around like he was a warrior from medieval times. Nobody could stop talking about this back in 1998. Well, because look at him. Steiner knew this too, because do not forget that he had a bunch of nicknames that referenced it, would do push-ups in the middle of the match, and would often flex his arm and talk about his bicep peak. Some say that this slowed him down in the ring, but as a man who lifts weights, I don't care. And I know you want to talk about what's going on behind the scenes, but again, it doesn't just happen. He must have been a walking diet plan. Number 1, Chyna. Fair play to Chyna. Say what you will about how she left WWE, but in 1999 and 2000, she utterly transformed her physique in order for it to suit her character better, but also so she could feel better deep down inside. And what was the end result? She was an even bigger star. You can get more information about this on Bruce Pritchard's and Jim Ross's podcast, because they have both mentioned how Chyna wasn't the most self-confident of people and wanted to try and bring out her more feminine side. She was kind of way ahead of her time when it did come to weightlifting though, and I bet today she would have been more accepted, and hopefully in turn that would have made her feel better about herself. Again though, you can't deny that the hard work wasn't there, and also original Chyna was just jacked and stacked. And there are stories out there that sometimes in the gym, she was able to lift more than Triple H, which means, what a damn badass.
Wrestling fans get bored of the same old shtick or stuff that's just not working in no time at all. When it came to each and every one of the talented folks on this list though, they thankfully realized it was time for a change before it was too late. So I'm Gareth, this is WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are 11 genius tweaks that made lame wrestling gimmicks great. Number 11, a tweak from badass hero to badass villain for Ronda Rousey. It honestly cannot be understated just how compelling Ronda Rousey's first WWE run really was from start to finish. Before she was being royally botched and fumbled in the time post-Royal Rumble 2022 comeback, Ronnie enjoyed an electric start to life as a pro wrestler, producing magic alongside Triple H, Stephanie McMahon, and Kurt Angle at WrestleMania 34. She'd then embark on a superb few months as an unstoppable babyface in the company, dominating all who stood in her way as the MMA badass eventually got her hands on Raw Women's Championship gold. It didn't matter that she wasn't the strongest on the mic. Rousey's unpredictable and often explosive work on it still made for captivating television. You just never knew what she was going to do next. And when the fans did inevitably decide they'd had enough of the predictably dominant baddest woman on the planet routine after her Survivor Series battle with Charlotte Flair, all of the above was eventually seamlessly used for a pissed off badass role instead. Rousey's unpredictable eruptions on the stick worked a treat as the out of control badass champion, and the same could be said for her equally mesmerizing beatdowns. Changing very little about her overall character, Ronda went from fiery hero to chaotic villain by finally rejecting the fans who had turned on her. They created a monster, damn it. Number 10, heel Jack Perry becomes a scapegoat. The Jack Perry heel character was not working in 2023, was it? It felt like only a matter of time before AEW would pull the trigger on the turn for this one-time Jungle Boy, following increasingly negative reactions towards the pillar. But when said moment finally occurred, Perry just wasn't fully clicking as a baddie, and many were wondering where he could possibly go from here, following a pretty underwhelming program with one-time tag partner Hook. And then that backstage all-in punker altercation happened on the night the aforementioned feud ended, a moment which forced Perry onto the sidelines for what felt like an age. Continuing on as a heel though, when Perry did finally return, he did so with a slightly tweaked persona. Instead of just being a bratty piece of crap who blamed the fans for his failures, and seemed to be struggling to figure out who he actually was, Perry confidently took on the role of of the frustrated scapegoat in New Japan Pro Wrestling following that all-in Punk mess. Ultimately joining forces with the Elite to take out Tony Khan and Kenny Omega, Perry is still technically the same slimy little git he was before. However, with the Young Bucks and Kazuchika Okada backing him up, his once lame entitled shtick now makes for a consistently engaging watch as he smirks to the camera and runs his mouth, safe in the knowledge that his EVP pals will keep the smug soul shielded going forward. Except from Flames. Number 9, Juice Robinson leans into the banter. The transformation of Juice Robinson on AEW programming is proof that you're only ever a tweak away from greatness. When the former NXT and New Japan Pro Wrestling star first showed up on Dynamite to lock up with Jon Moxley back in September 2022, he didn't exactly grab fans' attention. Sure, he put in a decent display in between the ropes, but the forgettable shades and leather vest Bullet Club member he was portraying just wasn't all that intriguing during his early days as an all-elite talent. Sensing he was in danger of getting completely lost in the shuffle on a roster that already had more names than he knew what to do with then, Juice squeezed something different out of his character in 2023. Joining forces with fellow BC man Jay White in April, Robinson began to descend into thrilling madness in front of our eyes, becoming Switchblade's bizarre personal cheerleader as he hilariously gurned and oddly danced his way through matches and promos. And the fact both AEW and Bullet Club Gold as a whole weren't quite the same without this welcome addition of madness in the time after Rock Hard went down injured is a testament to just how successful this brilliant nutty tweak really was. Number 8, Logan Paul finally understands the assignment. Some folks are just naturally unlikable, aren't they? That's the way it is. And no matter how hard Logan Paul fought against it after initially signing with WWE in 2022, his natural arrogance and status as a social media megastar made him the perfect heel for the WWE fanbase to hurl abuse at. For the longest time though, WWE and the cocky star himself insisted on trying to shove this confident hero gimmick down the throats of those watching on, in the hopes they would somehow connect with this irritating, smug, impulsive person. They didn't, of course, because the supposed babyface character was still one you wanted even the most dastardly heel to smack in the mug. And after finally realizing the experiment had well and truly failed, Paul smartly tweaked his persona in 2023 to that of a 360-degree entertainer, one who was done looking for the approval of the fans. It wasn't his fault they didn't understand one of the most talented part-time performers of recent times was standing right in front of them, you see. He was still just as brash and annoyingly confident as ever, but now he was wisely leaning into the boos rather than trying to fight them. Is Logan Paul the best wrestling heel of the last 5 years? Well, if he's not, then I want to know who you think is in the comments section right down below. Number 7, Austin Theory joins forces with a fellow a-hole. As a singles villain, Austin Theory was going nowhere fast. Sure, he had the physique, the in-ring ability, and time on his side, but not even the company strapping rocket after rocket to his back could convince audiences this was a star destined for main event greatness. Money in the Bank and John Cena victories couldn't mask the fact that Theory just didn't really boast enough charisma to keep an audience interested in whatever the hell he was doing. The promo delivery was dull, matches, though worked well enough, were often forgettable, and his overall presentation just screamed generic creator wrestler. In what eventually turned out to be a properly masterful tweak though, a Triple H who clearly wasn't all that convinced by the Theory main event project either, decided to throw him into a unit with then recent NXT call-up Grayson Waller. Alongside the gifted smack talker and effortlessly irritating Australian, Theory's go-away heat or even the more painful sound of apathy soon became genuinely aggravated reactions, as the two helped out Logan Paul and butted heads with the likes of Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins heading into WrestleMania 40. With a glorious slime ball like Waller to bounce off, Theory has noticeably grown more confident as a heelish performer every single week, and the pair walking out of the show of shows as WWE Tag Team Champions. A villainous mid-match win that was met with the perfect wave of heat was yet more proof that this tweak from singles heel to tag team a-hole was a very wise move. Number 6, a Liv Morgan with more of an edge forces you to watch her. Similarly to the aforementioned Theory, despite winning Money in the Bank and becoming SmackDown Women's Champion over the last few years, the Liv Morgan character never really kicked on to become a properly engaging part of the weekly product. On the back of being booked to look like a fluke champ thanks to a dreadful bit of screwy SummerSlam business with Ronda Rousey, a brief flirtation with a more extreme version of her character was soon followed by a run as Women's Tag Team Champions alongside Raquel Rodriguez. And that was just fine, really, wasn't it? But then Morgan found herself being attacked by Women's World Champion Rhea Ripley as a way of writing her off TV due to a shoulder injury in the summer of 2023. And it was that vicious act which opened the door for a much-needed tweak, taking that smiley, often just happy to be here attitude and injecting some intriguing edge into the mix. The Morgan who eventually returned on her revenge tour finally felt like a three-dimensional figure with a clear focus. She stopped at nothing to take the gold that Mammy once wore, and has been a far more compelling figure of late when biting back at the audience and putting Ripley on the shelf than she was as Blue Shell champion in 2022. This vengeance-obsessed Liv is already an improvement on the one we'd been watching in the years prior. Thanks for checking out this list today, folks, and if you're enjoying what you're watching, then hit that subscribe button down below for more of this WhatCulture wrestling stuff in your day. Number 5, Nia Jax becomes an actual irresistible force. While she certainly always looked the part of an unstoppable wrestling monster, Nia Jax's sometimes sloppy work in between the ropes and the poor booking of her character ultimately destroyed the irresistible force's aura during her first run. From the moment she returned to target Rhea Ripley in September of 2023, though, it was clear that this was not the same bulldozer who'd been lumped into an afterthought of a women's tag team division during the dying days of her last full-time spell with the company. Not only was this tweaked version of Jax now being booked like a genuine threat, she'd also evidently put in the work to become a more effective and safer worker inside of the squared circle. Her impressive displays as a properly intimidating threat to overcome against Becky Lynch and Ripley in 2024 in particular have both helped really establish Jax as one of the new final bosses of the division, much like her cousin. Oh, we will get there. Nia's performances in WWE's typical promo battles have noticeably improved too, with her growing confidence in this monster heel role leading to a far more assured, cocky delivery on the mic. Jax always had the makings of a real wrecking machine capable of being used to get valiant babyfaces over, and now, after some slightly bolder booking and a ton of hard work outside of the ring, that potential has been molded into a Queen of the Ring to be properly feared on the roster. Number 4, the Young Bucks embrace their EVP status. Now, the Young Bucks had already been gradually moving into heelish territory in the time before they returned to challenge Sting and Darby Allin in early 2024. And while it might be a bit harsh to class their gimmicks as completely lame at this point, there's also no denying that Matt and Nick Jackson were in need of a refresh in the wake of losing the ROH six-man titles with Hangman Page, before throwing a tantrum shortly after and then failing to defeat the Golden Jets at Full Gear 2023. That eventual refresh/tweak announced itself on the night of January 10th, with the Bucks walking out onto the Dynamite stage dressed like a pair of wonderful douchebags. This was merely the first sign of the conceited attitude they were about to bring to this particular Superkick party. From here, the tag legends finally well and truly embraced their EVP status, handing out fines to those who got in their way, demanding to be called by their God-given names of Matthew and Nicholas, and even tweaking their fan-favorite entrance to a more narcissistic presentation. And just like that, a pair of Bucks who seemed in danger of fading away on the show they helped create were revitalized, bringing in the aforementioned Jack Perry and Kazuchika Okada as they look to fully take over this land of all elite. Number 3, Jey Uso becomes a real main event star with a yeet. Jey Uso had gone on quite the journey heading into 2024, after picking up a bit of momentum as a main event singles performer during the pandemic, eventually reuniting with his brother to become record-breaking tag champions, and then finally leaving behind the bloodline in the summer of 2023. The one-time right-hand man landed on Monday nights. Before that Raw move, Jey had certainly had his moments as a single star, but the main event character was never really considered one of the true top babyfaces in the company, mostly because he was often booked to be a loser when he found himself in one-on-one action. The man couldn't buy a win. He wasn't completely lame by any means, but it did seem like the character would struggle to really break through the glass ceiling. However, once he was given that space to breathe and grow as an individual on Raw, not even a few more L's being added to that singles record could keep the yeet movement from spreading. The introduction of that one little word as part of his overall presentation seemingly transformed Jey into one of the hottest things in wrestling overnight, with every punch and superkick being met with a deafening yeet. Now sure, most of his work in between the ropes is still rarely gripping, but the satisfying experience of getting lost in a yeet down or a sea of bouncing arms has helped wash away even the most painful of main event memories. Number 2, Christian Cage adds a turtleneck. In case you needed reminding, Christian Cage is a wrestling genius. Throughout the first stage of his AEW career, the former World Heavyweight Champion largely acted as a fairly standard mentor/father figure for Jungle Boy Jack Perry. You knew where it was all leading to, with that inevitable stabbing in the back coming during June 15, 2022's Road Rager, when Cage finally turned on on his protege. But after this rather well-executed heel turn, and a properly shocking follow-up Christian promo planting the patriarch seed with his first of many dead father shots, the program was then ultimately dragged out way longer than it should have been due to Cage suffering an injury early on. So by the time Cage and Jungle Boy did actually collide in a match that lasted longer than 20 seconds, it's safe to say the whole thing had sadly cooled down somewhat, and Christian didn't feel like quite as hot of a baddie as he did back when he initially pulverized the youngster with a concerto. With something as simple as the wearing of a damn sleeveless turtleneck during their Revolution 2023 blow-off though, Cage swiftly re-established himself as the biggest tosser in the building. Just look at that a-hole. He then proceeded to wrestle like a slimy weasel during that final burial battle, and has continued to commit to both of those masterful tweaks during what has become a truly stellar villainous run as the patriarch of AEW. And number 1, The Rock becomes the final boss. There is no denying that The Rock's once golden shtick had finally grown a touch stale by the time he popped up on the Day 1 edition of Raw, with his ripping apart and beating down of Jinder Mahal while decked out in full Project Rock attire, not exactly blowing the minds of anyone who'd watched him do the same to Austin Theory, Baron Corbin, and The New Day over the years. And it was the idea of that phoned-in version of The Rock potentially getting in the way of Cody Rhodes finishing his precious story, which had folks feeling a tad frustrated coming into WrestleMania 40. Sensing that the people definitely didn't want their supposed champion in that main event spot though, Dwayne Johnson smartly decided to tweak his role in the story, taking his adored Hollywood Rock gimmick and turning it up to 11. A final boss was born, dropping the Under Armour and decking himself out in flamboyant vests, and occasionally the blood of an American nightmare as Rock unleashed a level of intensity and, well, electricity that wrestling viewers hadn't really seen from him ever. It may have taken a WWE Universe rejecting his planned babyface showdown against his cousin to get there, but have they not, the world would have never been treated to the foul-mouthed, unstable TKO board member version of Rock the people now simply cannot wait to see again. Finally, we got there.
We've talked about this before, and you already know deep down in your tum-tum, gimmicks in wrestling are super important. If you get told you have to be a plumber, you may struggle to main event WrestleMania, but if you get gifted the butt-kicking renegade, yeah, you're on a good path. We have seen some tremendous transformations over the years, though, so let's go through them right now. Number 10, Jay Lethal. Now this actually bucks the trend, because for most people, this would have been the kiss of death. Jay Lethal was going to go from a wrestler's wrestler to pretending he was Randy Savage. You can't sugarcoat that. Even though he was winning Ring of Honor and TNA titles all over the shop, some accused him of lacking in the personality department. So what did he do? This. It was in April 2007, and after Kevin Nash heard Lethal's spot on Macho Man impression, he told Jay to do that on TV, and why don't you even dress like him? It caught on pretty much instantly to the point Lethal started using Savage's old Pomp and Circumstance entrance music, and if you need a comparison, this was the opposite effect of what we did with the fake Diesel and fake Razor Ramon characters. What I mean by that is that it was actually entertaining. It really did give Lethal the extra oomph he needed, and he became crazy popular. So much so, he brought all of it back in 2018 at All In. Go and listen to that reaction. They knew. Number 9, Tony Storm. So I have mentioned this on Ups and Downs, but this is the best gimmick shift of 2023, and maybe in the modern era of professional wrestling. I just never would have called it. It's not like what Tony Storm was doing was bad before all this, because she was one of the most sought-after talents in the world, so nobody called this a total 180 where she believed herself to be a film star from the golden age who also enjoys throwing a shoe. Only in wrestling. It tied into Storm losing her AEW title as well, so a descent into madness was the explanation, and ever since then, it's just got better and better. Tony is basically a super babyface now. That's what happens when you make something as good as this. Storm also doesn't care about being ridiculous, which I'm a huge fan of, and there's no doubt about it for me. The Timeless One is the centerpiece of the women's division. I can't get enough of it. The proof is in the pudding, as they say, which is why she broke all AEW records by becoming a 3-time women's champion, and long may this continue. So good. I don't see why we can't ride this out for ages too. It's got legs. Number 8, Matt Hardy. So this divided opinion, but man, I loved it. I don't know where Matt Hardy came up with this, but one day he decided to go broken and just became the most bonkers character in all of wrestling. Caught the entire industry off guard. Such was the talk, there were even reports of WWE superstars having hourly viewings backstage to watch the final deletion, and it totally gave Matt new steam, and in turn reignited interest in TNA. Couldn't have gone better. Before long, he was also deleting Jeff Hardy, who became Brother Nero, and honestly, it is an iconic run no matter how you spin it. Even the Woken attempt in WWE was alright. It was nowhere near as good, but the gimmick just worked. Hardy in many ways brought back cinematic matches too, and I will always go back and watch these. It rules, and it's everything good about wrestling. As long as everybody agrees, you can do whatever the flub you want. With all these insider references, well, I'm just going to be honest with you, I thought it was damn terrific. Number 7, Batista. Never forget that when Dave Batista debuted in the WWE, it was alongside Devon Dudley, and he was called Deacon. I have no idea. As Devon was a reverend, there was also some weird spiritual context to all this, and it just didn't fit. Batista was massive. No way should he just be a lackey who collected money. Thankfully, it only lasted a few months before Big Dave wrecked this guy, and after a super short feud, Batista went to Raw and switched gears immediately. Soon after that, he was put into Evolution because everybody knew what we had here. That's why 2 years later, he was beating Triple H for the world title at WrestleMania. It also ties into the fact Batista is super underrated these days. He was so much more than just a monster. The dude could go, and the first step to showing that to the world was changing the damn gimmick. Number 6, Sting. This just sums up how great Sting is. There was nothing wrong with Surfer Sting, and many people will tell you that's their favorite version. I get it. When the mid-90s rocked around though, Steve Borden realized he needed to change something to remain in the loop, and yep, he painted his face black and white and became a vigilante. Stories have always credited this to Scott Hall, who told Sting to watch the movie The Crow, and don't tell me this didn't work. What did the man do for a year after he changed? Nothing. Just hang out in the rafters, but it was the coolest thing ever. He was just the best. When he finally attacked the NWO, people lost it, and again, look, he retired in 2024, and this persona was as strong as it ever has been. That is just incredible. While I have to ignore Starrcade 1997, every other single thing he pretty much did with this, well, it was totally fabu. Number 5, Bray Wyatt. Late Wyndham Rotunda is rightfully lauded as one of the most creative minds in wrestling history. Not everything hit, but how on earth he came up with both Bray Wyatt and The Fiend, I'll never know, and the cinematic stuff he did with John Cena, Randy Orton, and Braun Strowman were like nothing else. I don't think anybody else could have thought this up. His first rumblings were in 2010 though, as he was Husky Harris, and it was enough to get him to the main roster. He was part of the Nexus that year, although it's safe to say nothing much was going to happen with this. He was basically left in the background. Rather than just stay in this lane, however, Husky had a rethink in 2012 when he returned as a mysterious cult leader. It is where he debuted the Wyatt name and teamed up with Eric Rowan and Luke Harper. Before you knew it, they were the damn NXT Tag Team Champions. This was mostly based on the fact they were so popular and why within 1 year they were on the main roster. These guys were cooked and ready to go. It is fair to say that WWE never really knew what they had, but Bray was always so over. He won multiple titles as well as the WWE Championship. And I tell you, given all of this, I totally believe that if Harris had been given more rope, Wyndham would have figured that out as well. He just got it. While we're all quick to talk about generational in-ring talent, other areas are just as important. If you want to get into the chat about gimmicks, presentation, and aura, look no further than this guy. He was one of a kind. Number 4, Kane. I am amazed the real-life Glenn Jacobs was able to hold on. Look at his early gimmicks in the WWF. He was Isaac Yankem, the wrestling dentist, and yes, that name was a pun, and then Fake Diesel. That's right, he had to pretend to be somebody else. This was bad. Through no fault of his own, the rumor was that he was running out of legs when it came to his job. There was this massive man, and he was kind of just hanging out playing Nintendo. Begs the question as to why this is what the company chose for him to do, even more so because Isaac originally had been brought in by Jerry Lawler to take out Bret Hart. Why the flub did he hire a dentist? He also just lost all the time before he vanished from TV when somebody in 1997 decided the next step for The Undertaker was a fight with his fake brother. Enter Kane. To say this is one of the best decisions ever made is an understatement, because in one night no one remembered this other nonsense. The Big Red Machine was over instantly because the whole idea was great. That Bad Blood debut is all time. Even then it was only planned for a short run, but Kane was so good, he went on to have a 20-plus year career and feuded with the likes of Taker, Steve Austin, Triple H, and anybody who had a name. He even won a world title. In total, he can also lay claim to 19 championships post this switch, and he still has the current record for most total eliminations in the Royal Rumble. So he is an all-timer. I will leave you with this to ponder though. Would Yankem have had similar success? No, he wouldn't. Number 3, Triple H. This is always a fun one. Even though WWF management were high on one Paul Levesque, when he debuted, he was the Greenwich Blue blood who hated poor people. The mid-90s were wild when it came to gimmicks. This was in 1995, and everybody had to have a silly personality such as this, although to be fair, it's not like he wasn't used. In terms of the roster, he had moderate success with it all. Through solid, constant work, he was able to impress those behind the scenes and eventually wound up with the Intercontinental title. That was a big deal, especially compared to what Hunter had been doing. He slowly but surely then started to change his mannerisms and even began to wear a leather jacket. When he linked up with Shawn Michaels in China, was redubbed Triple H, and that was that. We never looked back. DX was formed and pushed the boundaries of what to expect on WWE TV. When Michaels had to step away due to his back injury, Triple H kept on pushing. When the time was right, he adopted the Game moniker and turned himself into the ultimate badass. Just go and watch his stuff in the year 2000. It is excellent. From there, it was a pathway all the way to the top with a total of 14 world title reigns to boot. I don't care who he married either. If Triple H didn't adopt this switch, I don't think he hits these levels. For a good old while, he was the perfect heel. And not because he was rich and doing a silly bow. Number 2, The Rock. You can go and watch this right now. When Dwayne Johnson debuted as Rocky Maivia in 1996, I don't think anybody knew what was going to happen. Even The Undertaker has said this in a recent podcast. He thought the man may even lose his job. It mostly failed as it was just so on the nose, with Rocky smiling even when he lost. But also his ring gear, there were so many tassels. He was also shoved down the fans' throat because he won the Intercontinental title almost instantly, but his version of Maivia was just too clean cut. Nobody wanted this at all, so what did we get? Rocky sucks and die Rocky die chants. That was a bit much, but still, it's not like you're going to get confused by it. A knee injury took him out the game for a while, but during that period the decision was made. When he did return, he was to be a bad guy, and to make that super obvious, he was going to team up with the Nation of Domination. It's not like this was an instant change either, but within a few months, The Rock, as he was now named, was dropping fire promos, coming up with ridiculously wonderful moves like the People's Elbow, and just presenting himself as a megastar. Turned out he was right, because from that moment he did become the most electrifying man in sports entertainment, before leaving WWE to smash Hollywood as well. That's just bonkers, and I tell you, he opened doors that I assume will never be closed again, so he totally changed the game. Number 1, Steve Austin. Always remember that when WWE hired Steve Austin in 1995, they just thought he was a good hand. How ridiculous is that? They knew he could work, hence why he was dubbed the Ringmaster, as he could be a great utility man for others to fight and eventually be beaten by. It's why the $1 Million Man was his manager. Austin doesn't need to talk, just do your thing and leave. So I can't imagine anybody in power had actually seen what he was doing in ECW and WCW, because the hints were all there. It wasn't until 1996 rolled around and he presented the Stone Cold character where things finally changed around. Even then he needed a spot of luck, but when plans changed and he was selected as the King of the Ring winner, he dropped that 316 promo and started a chain reaction that was going to set wrestling on fire. His feud with The Rock and Vince McMahon soon became etched into history, and the amount of merchandise he sold was hilarious. Not sure that's ever going to happen if you're the master of the ring. If you want to call him the most important part of WWE ever, there is an argument to that, and he was a major reason the Monday Night War switched around. Everybody loved Stone Cold Steve Austin. So yes, when you put all that in a pot, I'm not sure there's anybody else who has made such a wonderful gimmick change. He didn't just shake up his own success, but basically took over the whole industry to boot. What a mad and wild ride.
This lot were all smart enough to realise a little change-up was long overdue, and it was those various minor upgrades that helped transform them into some of the coolest workers in the game. I am Gareth here from WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are 10 brilliant tweaks that suddenly made wrestlers cool as F-word. Number 10, Seth Rollins' new tune leads to a surge in popularity. Sure, everyone appreciated his typically superb work in between the ropes, but everything from his architect to the Monday Night Messiah shtick never managed to really take Seth Rollins to the next level in terms of audience reaction. Back at WrestleMania 37 though, the star debuted a new piece of entrance music that would ultimately help elevate him to the rank of one of the most over figures WWE had to offer. On top of slowly turning up the volume on his already increasingly outrageous outfits, the crowd suddenly deciding to get in on the woes present in that updated tune unexpectedly unexpectedly combined to create magic, as Seth went from cackling annoyance to one of the coolest / bizarrest acts in town. Your mileage may vary on the flashy hero's silly get-ups and insistence on leaning into the deafening singing more and more each week, but on the whole, the evidence of Rollins' tune helping gradually take him from reliable main eventer to one of the most popular lads in the business is there for all to hear. Number 9, a change of hair color helps make Cody Rhodes undeniable. At no point during his first WWE run would any fan have been quick to class the son of Dusty Rhodes as one of the cooler performers found bumping on weekly sports entertainment programming. And for the longest time, Cody Rhodes was also completely against adopting the same colored hair his legendary father had sported throughout his time immortalizing himself within the industry. But both those things suddenly changed back in 2017, not too long after requesting his release from and leaving WWE. Rhodes finally decided to embrace the hair color that instantly brought back memories of his iconic late father at Ring of Honor's Final Battle pay-per-view that year. That night may have ended in defeat and the losing of his Ring of Honor World Championship to Dalton Castle, but Rhodes' surprising tweaking of his hairstyle that night only further cemented his status as one of the coolest stars working in the industry at the time. And that unmistakable hair is now a vital part of the awesome American Nightmare brand WWE jumped at the chance to bring into their universe. Number 8, Sheamus dials the physicality up to 11. Back in September, AEW's World Champion MJF opted to mercilessly bury one of WWE's longest-serving powerhouses. Those comments stating that Sheamus had taken a decade to get over may have seemed a little harsh at first, but the loudmouth salt of the earth did have a bit of a point. Despite regularly colliding with some of the biggest stars the company had to offer, holding multiple world titles and changing up his character on a number of occasions, the big Irish ass kicker had never really reached the level of super popular face or properly detestable heel. Something just never properly clicked until the summer of 2022. Sheamus had always been a pretty hard-hitting, no-nonsense worker, but clashing with a ring general like Gunther brought a new level of babyface intensity out of the fire-haired brawling brute. With the pair's Clash at the Castle epic briefly seeing Shamey rise to the level of hottest hero in the company. The star didn't even drastically change that much. He simply took his already highly physical style and passionate persona up a few notches. And in the process, the former WWE Champion went from stale mid-carder to one of the most enjoyable badasses in the business. Now, what was your favorite banger of the last year? Well, let me know in the comment section down below. Number 7, Randy Orton embraces his new stoner pal. Despite all those world title wins, WrestleMania main events, and countless other accolades, there had never really been a moment in time when fans accepted Randy Orton as a genuinely cool babyface they could properly get behind. The Viper was simply at his best when he was effortlessly stabbing the folks you actually enjoyed watching in the back. However, 20 years into his run as part of the sports entertainment machine, Orton came into contact with a wide-eyed stoner by the name of Matt Riddle, and arguably the best run of his entire career soon began to unfold. Along with consistently unleashing arguably the most electric hot tag in the game, the Viper's subtle shift from sinister veteran to exasperated straight man was inspired. And in no time at all, the pair's odd couple chemistry resulted in RK Bro becoming one of the hottest and freshest acts in the company. Who knew that all it took to turn Randy into a legitimately over hero was a few weed jokes and a flip-flop wearing sidekick. Number 6, Brock plus cowboy hat equals money. The sight of Brock Lesnar launching another human around a squared circle will never not be awesome. That being said, the Beast Incarnate's once effective gimmick of sporadically rocking up to Raw or SmackDown, obliterating some unfortunate full-timers, and silently dancing around the ring whilst Paul Heyman did his talking for him, had worn a little bit thin by WrestleMania 36. So when a ponytail-boasting Brock did make a shocking comeback on the night of SummerSlam 2021, the idea of the returning former UFC heavyweight champion once again clashing with Heyman's new client Roman Reigns didn't immediately get pulses racing. Little did fans know that new facial hair and top knot weren't the only things different about this familiar foe. During his time away, Brock had actually hilariously embraced his inner cowboy, with the still rather terrifying force of nature gradually morphing into one of the coolest protagonists in wrestling, after eventually donning a cool new hat and reminding folks that he was secretly one of the finest talkers on the roster. Cowboy Brock clearly had the time of his damn life organically popping the crowd and showing the world how effortlessly he could step into the role of undeniably awesome babyface. And it was a hell of a ride while it lasted. Number 5, Bobby Lashley brings in new management. Another formidable former heavyweight MMA fighter who was in need of a bit of a change-up heading out of the surreal WrestleMania experience that was the 36th show of shows, Bobby Lashley was in a strange place back in mid-2020, and after losing to Aleister Black in an instantly forgotten match at the Performance Center event, the powerhouse eventually decided to consider a change in management. At this point, the former United States champion was being aided by his on-screen wife, Lana, but that bizarre partnership on the back of an equally odd Rusev love triangle hadn't exactly helped reignite the floundering Titan's career. Lashley had finally had enough by the time Lana accidentally cost her hubby a WWE Championship match against Drew McIntyre at Backlash, and the star opted to file for divorce soon after. That's a hell of a reaction. The ending of that relationship ultimately kicked off a chain reaction which led to the forming of a little faction by the name of the Hurt Business. And it wasn't too long before this cool, suited and booted unit were draped in gold, with that time bulldozing the roster helping set the stage for Lashley to finally take his place as WWE's next main event prizefighter. Number 4, Athena's attitude adjustment. Throughout her career, Athena has always been one of the most explosive and exciting workers on just about any roster she's found herself on, and that was certainly the case when she finally arrived in AEW after being released from WWE in 2021. However, despite definitely still showcasing flickers of the fiery performer within during those early days on the All Elite products, the one-time Ember Moon still seemed a little lost on the back of her rather underwhelming final days in the world of sports entertainment. Athena as a violent babyface was fine, however it soon became apparent that a slight change in attitude could offer her the chance to finally re-establish herself as one of the most captivating personalities working today. After suddenly and shockingly snapping on Aubrey Edwards during a Rampage battle in November 2022, Athena gradually exuded a more sadistic energy and began acting like a little snarky a-hole in her own words. That revival of her American Joshi hard-hitting bad guy approach hasn't just led to her becoming the current and rather vicious Ring of Honor Women's Champion, it's also made her one of the coolest villains in the game, and made every one of her brutal defenses a must-see event. Number 3, Miro bins off the games. Rather than arriving in town and simply being pushed as a charismatic wrecking machine, the one-time Rusev showed up in AEW as Kip Sabian's best man, and the two spent more time tapping away on video games than taking the company by storm. Thankfully, Tony Khan had the sense to finally let Miro ditch the video games and his odd alliance with Sabian in April 2021, and with a few tweaks to his overall presentation, God's favorite champion soon set about dominating just about every soul put in front of him as one of the company's greatest TNT champions to date. Miro himself admitted to that initial gamer gimmick just not being true to who he was as a person. The Redeemer, though, was a savage character that finally felt like the chance to show the world what the former WWE star was really capable of. Number 2, Roman Reigns ditches the vest. The big dog always possessed the potential to one day become the biggest star in the industry. His progress was just largely stifled by dreadful dialogue, frustrating booking, and an anything but cool overall presentation. Back when Roman Reigns was fighting alongside the other Hounds of Justice, that tactical vest and thunderous duh-duh music worked a treat, sure. But while the rest of the wrestling world moved on in the 6 years that followed the infamous Shield breakup, the regularly rejected face of the company wasn't allowed to drop the same increasingly stale look he'd been sporting for almost a decade. Then, after years of folks crying out for a change, Roman finally shed that outdated Shield tribute look and debuted an absolutely ripped torso at Clash of Champions 2020. The returning Tribal Chief's long-awaited shift into arrogant heel territory obviously helped him rise to the level of most compelling figure on wrestling television too. However, it was the visual tweak of that much-needed vest dropping and addition of his operatic new accompaniment whenever he wandered into an arena that really kicked off Roman's reign as the coolest villain of the modern era. And number 1, the Guns upgrade their entrance. Throughout much of their time as one of the company's go-to jobber units, and even after shockingly beating the Acclaim to win their tag team gold, the Guns would often burst onto the stage and flail around like a pair of unruly kids hyped on Haribo. In a move that instantly made the AEW duo feel like a bit of a big deal though, that arrival was completely overhauled heading into their championship match with FTR on April 5th's Dynamite. Adding 50 Cent's Many Men tune to the mix for the night, the cocky unit simply stood back to back with mist in the air as a camera panned around them. Simple but oh so very cool. In fact, it didn't take long for AEW fans to start classing this as perhaps the coolest entrance in the business, even without 50 Cent's Men. With Austin's Triple H-esque water sprays as he fired off his finger guns being another smooth touch. With one masterful tweak, even these dweebs managed to rise to the rank of undisputedly cool. Had this collection of impressive talents not decided to alter their looks slightly, gradually been pulled away from dying factions, or been given a subtle attitude adjustment, who knows where they'd each be today. So I am Gareth, this is WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are 10 next level tweaks that took wrestlers from lame to cool as F-word. Number 10, Steve Austin shaves his head. Before he was opening up cans of whoop-ass, Steve Austin was struggling to make a rather lame ringmaster gimmick work on Vince McMahon's product. And after fighting a losing battle with his hair for years, Austin eventually decided to bite the bullet and completely shave his ringmaster buzz cut to the point where he was completely bald, swiftly transformed Austin into a badass looking SOB. And it was only a matter of time before WWE dropped the ringmaster gimmick entirely after that hair disappeared, as Austin eventually added a goatee and fiery attitude to this always evolving character. Had Austin not decided to pull out the clippers back in 1996, there's a good chance the Texas Rattlesnake would have never been born. Number 9, Rhea Ripley becomes Mammy. Now it's worth noting right away that Rhea Ripley wasn't exactly an entirely lame performer before she started referring to herself as the Mammy of Monday nights. However, it's fair to say that the star's momentum certainly slowed down in the wake of dropping the Raw Women's title to Charlotte Flair at Money in the Bank 2021. With bland partnerships with Nikki Ash and Liv Morgan not giving the gifted performer the chance to properly grow as a main character on WWE programming. That all thankfully began to change when a now heel Ripley brought her always violent and rather charming work to the Judgment Day in 2022 by adding jet black hair and even more intimidating studs and spikes to her gear. Combine that with Ripley's willingness to let her real personality shine more than ever before, and you now have one of the coolest and most engaging characters in all of wrestling. Now I've got a quick question for you. We all know that Ripley and Charlotte Flair had an absolute banger at WrestleMania 39, but I want to know what was your favorite women's match of 2023. Let me know in the comments section down below. Number 8, Toni Storm becomes timeless. Toni Storm was already one of the top in-ring performers in AEW's women's division long before she went all black and white. It still often felt like Toni was being overshadowed by the rest of her fellow outcasts on the road to All In 2023. But then, after shockingly dropping her strap to Hikaru Shida a few weeks before that Wembley show, something suddenly snapped within the then former champion. And from that adjustment came some of the most inspired and genuinely impressive comedy ever to land on AEW TV, as the hilarious figure began launching shoes and ordering folks to keep their chin up and tits out each and every week. Number 7, Becky Lynch goes from being a generic unwanted heel to the man. The character WWE wanted Becky Lynch to play in the wake of SummerSlam 2018 was about as dry and unexciting as they come. After watching her one-time mate Charlotte Flair steal the SmackDown Women's Championship at that event, the last kicker was ordered to march out in front of a Blue Show crowd and cut the most forced, unoriginal heel promo imaginable. Here, Lynch claimed that, despite the deafening support being sent her way, the folks cheering her name never really cared about her. The entire thing was about as lame as it gets, and not a single fan on planet Earth honestly saw the underdog who had once again been screwed out of her big moment as the heel in this scenario. Thankfully, it wasn't too long until WWE finally got the message and began tweaking Lynch into more of a tweener badass. And by the time a fearless Becky had her face broken by Nia Jax on the road to Survivor Series, the man and the biggest babyface in the company had well and truly come around. Number 6, CM Punk distances himself from the new Nexus. After taking charge of the latest new version of the dying Nexus faction, the Punker and his team were all chucked out of the Royal Rumble by John Cena, and the Chip Magnet was bested by Randy Orton at both WrestleMania 27 and Extreme Rules. And then something wonderful happened happened on June 27, 2011. WWE handed the voice of the voiceless a live microphone and let him do what he did best. WWE also wisely began slowly distancing the hottest performer in the company from a group they'd evidently lost all interest in pushing. He'd then perform one final all-important tweak before fully evolving into the best in the world, finally dropping the black and yellow armband for good as he wandered into Chicago on the night of Money in the Bank. Cheers for watching this video today, and if you like what you see, then go and tap on that subscribe button down below. Number 5, Julia Hart goes down her own dark path. This wasn't simply a case of throwing on some black tights and becoming cool as F-word overnight. In fact, during her first year as part of the mysterious House of Black group, Julia did little of note outside of acting as the faction's spooky valet, and only really wrestling on the company's YouTube shows. But then something appeared to finally click for the youngster in 2023. A far more aggressive and intense Julia was finally given the opportunity to head down her own path away from the rest of her sinister team. And after fine-tuning her chilling entrance by adding some additional menacing lighting and introducing a spectacular moonsault to her always improving and increasingly savage arsenal, the almost all-conquering badass ultimately lifted her first piece of gold at Full Gear 2023, becoming AEW's youngest ever champ in the process. Number 4, Drew McIntyre gets fed up. It wasn't too long ago that this fed-up Scottish warrior felt like one of the stalest characters in the business. After failing to take down their tribal chief at Clash at the Castle in 2022, Drew proceeded to float around the mid-card, and while he would still form 1/3 of the 5-star WrestleMania 39 epic over the Intercontinental Championship, it was clear that something was still missing from this much less captivating McIntyre. A fantastic tweaking attitude finally transformed the former WWE Champion back into a figure folks genuinely gave a damn about after Jey Uso arrived on Raw though. As McIntyre continued to refuse to accept the former Bloodline man had changed, he slowly morphed into a far more intense and fearsome force. But more importantly, he's become a wonderfully complex character you find yourself rooting for one moment and praying they'll be superkicked out of the arena the next. Number 3, Swerve Strickland joins the Embassy and becomes a sadistic leader. After a surprisingly effective thrown-together partnership with Keith Lee, their inevitable implosion and Swerve Strickland's heel turn as he unleashed the new Mogul Affiliates faction didn't exactly catapult him to superstardom. But when Trench and Parker Boudreaux both went down injured in 2023, plans needed to be tweaked, and Strickland soon found himself joining forces with the far more intimidating Embassy faction. From here, the sinister leader of the now Mogul Embassy only went from strength to strength, as he grew into one of the most unsettling figures on the roster during his increasingly violent war with Darby Allin and his pals. And both the undeniable chemistry between himself and the always welcome Prince Nana have undoubtedly helped elevate the Swerve character over the past 12 months. Number 2, Shinsuke Nakamura is given some subtitles. Whether twiddling his mustache as a bland cartoonish villain, or simply dancing his way to the ring to the sound of Rick Boog shredding on guitar, Nak just always felt like a lame shadow of his former self under Vince's watch. However, things gradually changed once Papa H made himself comfy on the creative throne, and by adding something as wonderfully simple as some subtitles to the threatening promos Shinsuke began cutting in his native tongue, Nak quickly re-established himself as a rather compelling and sinister entity on Monday nights. This marvelous subtitle tweak is finally giving Nak the opportunity to let that undeniable charisma flow. Number 1, Chris Jericho drops the list and becomes the alpha. Perhaps the most important tweak Le Champion has ever made to his overall character came when Chris Jericho decided to shock the world and show up in New Japan Pro Wrestling in 2017. One of Jericho's final appearances on WWE programming told the story of a gimmick that had seemingly run out of steam. As the veteran threatened to add AJ Styles' name to his all-important list on SmackDown, the once deafening reactions to that pen click were noticeably quieter. So, doing what he does best, Jericho opted to tweak his presentation ever so slightly when the time came to pop up in Japan, dropping the once incredibly over-list gimmick while still boasting the same general look as he clashed with the likes of Kenny Omega and Tetsuya Naito and eventually became a more brutal painmaker.
If you're in pro wrestling and you find yourself jerking curtains every week, you have but two choices. Either retire the Brooklyn Brawler or wrestle long enough to see yourself become one of the guys on this list. I'm Andy from WhatCulture Wrestling, and these are 10 incredible transformations from jobbers to WWE Champion. Number 10. Jinder Mahal. Former 3MB jobber Jinder Mahal returned to WWE in late 2016, decked out in a snazzy getup that for some reason covered up the fact that he'd gotten pretty damn ripped during his time away. All that chicken breast, brown rice and hard work had paid off, baby, and Jinder was in Vince McMahon shape. This meant that even though he was booked pretty uselessly for his first while back, the world title push was on its way. Elevated as a means of capitalising on the huge but untapped Indian marketplace, Jinder's run was, unfortunately, and this is being polite, a total bust, failing to spark business in India in any meaningful way. Drab matches, angles and storylines meant that the reign went down kinda like a turd in a punch bowl, and it didn't help that he was out there beating fan favourites like Shinsuke Nakamura. But even today, the reign survives as a legacy line every time Jinder shows up on TV. He was WWE Champion for a considerable length of time, and nobody can ever take that away. Even though they maybe should. Number 9. Jeff Hardy. Young Jeffrey was just 16 years old when Razor Ramon smacked the piss out of him in a Raw squash in 1994. But he made such a good impression doing the jobby job that he was kept around in this role for the best part of 5 years, and so too was his brother Matt. Between them, the Hardys were pretty much looking up at the lights almost every weekend. The commendable bumping and selling that the Hardys offered wasn't transformed into anything meaningful until Michael Hayes came along as manager in 1998. A wholesale change of appearance and daring feud with Edge and Christian was the point of no return. And while Matt never became WWE Champion himself, Jeff capped his incredible rise in December 2008, finally beating Edge and Triple H to win the big one. Number 8. JBL. Now, JBL wasn't exactly the most successful WWE champion, I think it's safe to say. He held the belt for the best part of a year, but the reign wasn't particularly well received. That being said, the transformation from Bradshaw to JBL was rapid, even if it was a little bit too much for many long-standing fans to handle. Big John had been a barroom brawler in the APA literally weeks before lifting WWE's richest prize. But the jobber tag here doesn't refer to his days alongside Farouk, no. JBL's pre-Attitude Era stint as Justin Hawk Bradshaw and as a member of the New Blackjacks is what really gets him on this list. These runs appeared to brand him as a loser for life, so respect is due not only for him clinging around for so long to get this shot, but for him making the most of it as well. Number 7. Mankind. It took Jim Ross's best sales pitch to convince Vince McMahon that Mick Foley was worth the money in 1996. But if the chairman really wanted proof of Mick's commitment to the cause, then all he needed to do was cast his mind back a decade to a match that Vince himself commentated on. Wrestling as Jack Foley, Mick received such a vicious beating from the British Bulldogs that he could have been forgiven for walking away from the business entirely. This was brutal stuff. Davey Boy Smith nearly sent him through the ring with a running power slam, and Dynamite Kid? Well, he dislodged Foley's jaw with a clothesline so starchy the match resembled a particularly violent trip to the laundrette. Years later, as Mankind, Cactus Jack and Dude Love, Foley was almost all things to all fans, and a made man forever after heroically winning the WWE title in 1998. Number 6. Diesel. Yeah, alright, so he didn't draw well as WWE Champion, but just look at all the bollocks Kevin Nash had to deal with before making it to the top. Master Blaster Steel? Oz? Vinny Vegas? Just not good. At all. It took jumping from WCW to WWE in 1993 for Nash to finally escape jobberdom forever. As Diesel, he was WWE Champion in just over a year. Then he hopped over to WCW, where, as an outsider, he did pretty damn well as well. A legend in the 2 biggest American wrestling companies ever, it's safe to say that he shook off the jobber stench. Number 5. Kane! Isaac Yankem could have been a career killer. Fake Diesel should have been a career killer. But when Glenn Jacobs finally clicked as the burned brother of a WWE cornerstone, the wrestling world was there for the taking. Kane's run as WWE Champion only lasted one day, admittedly, but that he was able to overcome playing an evil dentist and then a Kevin Nash cosplayer to become one of the most tenured wrestlers in company history is, well, a ridiculous achievement. Still, we probably could have done without Katie Vick, and stalking Lita, and buzzing Shane McMahon's testicles, and okay, you get the point. Number 4, Triple H. The future Mr. Stephanie McMahon was taught to eat shit and learn to like the taste of it back in 1996, embarking on a sentence as a jobber to the stars after the curtain call. But it actually started before that as well. WrestleMania 12 saw him squashed by the Ultimate Warrior in a match that is actually kinda hilarious in retrospect. But Triple H's period in the sin bin is often overstated. Sure, he was somewhat buried from May, but he was Intercontinental Champion by October, and now he's kinda one of the most decorated wrestlers in WWE history. So there you go. Number 3, Daniel Bryan. Bryan was only ever a jobber in the minds of his bosses, rocking up in the original version of NXT to argue with his mentor The Miz and go on a damaging losing streak that kinda gave the impression that WWE didn't want him to succeed. The company succeeded only in getting him eliminated from the semi-worked show, and the controversy was made worse when he was let go after choking Justin Roberts with his tie during the debut of The Nexus. It was the stupidest possible start to life in WWE, but made better by a decent SummerSlam return and eventual surge up the card for one of WWE's most beloved modern stars. Number 2, Yokozuna. Originally positioned as Kokina, the third head shrinker in his tryout matches, Yokozuna's original persona was stark contrast to the one he'd mastered by the time he made it to TV. Abandoning the Samoan angle, he became a Japanese sumo star with an incredible level of conviction and jaw-dropping athleticism, winning the Royal Rumble mere months after debuting. After that, he dethroned WWE Champions Bret Hart and Hulk Hogan on consecutive pay-per-views. But the tragedy of all this is that the persistent rewards ran parallel with the dangerous weight gain that ultimately caused his passing in 2000. Still, Yoko was one of the all-time great big men in his prime, and the gimmick change was a huge part of his transformation. And at number 1, Steve Austin. Famously let go from WCW because Eric Bischoff didn't think he was marketable, Steve Austin had to undergo the wholesale deconstruction of his stunning Steve character before being shunted out the door altogether. And after a brief cup of coffee in ECW, he made his way to WWE, where he had to bide his time as the ringmaster. It was at this point in his career that Austin must have been wondering when, if ever, he was going to catch a big break. Fortunately, that break came with the infamous Austin 316 promo at King of the Ring 96. Now, he'd have to wait a few more months before the mega push began in earnest, but with that gimmick, the Attitude Era's most important and iconic persona was born. And yeah, he became WWE Champion. That's kind of why he's on the list.